After returning home, Masamba found out that his mother's condition had improved. She could eat and her wounds were healing rapidly after the village herbalist administered her treatments with good herbs. Masamba decided to keep the news of his sister's death from his mother and discreetly planned her funeral 2 days later. Filled with anger and rage, Masamba confronted his father, Samba, warning him that if anything happens to his mother, he would have him to contend with. With pride, his father dismissed his threats and couldn't care less about the situations of his family. Concurrently, Bazi was shaken by the news of his sister's death and his mother's predicament. He was in so much shock that he couldn't even coordinate the family business. He couldn't bear returning home and chose to stay in the beer palace because it alters his reality in the sense that his father, Samba, who was his role model all his life, had caused his mother so much pain and supported the abuse of his sister that led to her death. Bazi refused to stay sober and mourned Zola and the chaos in their home with drunkenness. Meanwhile, Nsayi was recovering, but troubled by Zola's absence since the incident. Masamba advised Nsayi that it is best for Zola to stay at her husband's house to avoid further problems. He promised to watch over Zola and comfort Nsayi. On the day of Zola's burial, Masamba had carried Zola's body to one of their farms discreetly, and he told all the maids to keep an eye on Nsayi. The village joined him to mourn as he carried his sister to bury her. Nsayi was feeling better after the treatment from the herbalist and had decided to go see Zola secretly. She demanded that one of the maids help her to Zola's house. On her way there, she heard a crowd wailing from afar. She instructed the maid to follow the crowd to see what was going on. Upon them getting there, she realized it was a burial. Curious, Nsayi continued following them. When they got to the farm, she questioned herself and asked why this place seems familiar. This is her father's farm and where he was buried. Zola's corpse was placed on the ground close to the grave dug. Immediately as Nsayi saw Zola's corpse, she went into shock, screamed, and fell to the ground. The crowd and Masamba stopped wailing and focused on the direction on where the scream came from. To their greatest surprise, it was from Nsayi. Masamba rushed and cradled his mother, shaking her to wake up, but she did not. Nsayi had undergone a stroke from this event. Masamba had to bury his sister and deal with his mother's horrible condition due to the shock from Zola's death. Nsayi, overwhelmed with shock, lay on her mat, pleading for death to take her. She confided in Masamba that death would be preferable than enduring the tragedy that had befallen her only daughter. Masamba tried to console her, encouraging her to fight for recovery. However, the village herbalist believed that Nsayi's condition was there, and her chances of returning to normal were slim. Nsayi herself longed for death. When she requested to see Samba, he hesitated. His pride and weakness prevented him from entering Nsayi's hut. Eventually, he relented. Witnessing Nsayi's pain and hearing her curses, Samba felt guilt but suppressed it. He convinced himself that he couldn't let a woman's emotions sway him, even if she was his wife. Nsayi accused Samba of causing their family's troubles, branding him a monster. Overwhelmed by the guilt once more, Samba left, vowing to never return. He sought solace in beer palace and other women's arms, drowning in the dilemma he had created for himself and his household. Nsayi's health was fading with each passing day. One evening, she summoned her sons, Mbazi and Masamba. Mbazi was initially resistant to the idea of visiting her, but he eventually relented. Upon entering the hut, he found Masamba already there, offering comfort to Nsayi. Bazi positioned himself near the door, deliberately avoiding his family's distress and mirroring his father's coldness. Nsayi's tears flowed upon seeing Bazi, and Masamba joined her in sorrow, deeply affected by his mother's anguish. Bazi remained detached, focusing on the ground to maintain his composure. Nsayi then spoke gravely, cursing any of her sons that would emulate their father's path and warning Bazi that she saw his influence taking hold of him. She begged him to change for the better to avoid the same fate for his future family. She criticized societal norms that made marriage in men's favor, holding them responsible for her daughter's death at her husband's hand and her own impending demise from her husband's abuse. She urged her sons to work together to become better men and choose wives they truly love and respect. These were her last words before a coughing fit overtook her. Bazi quickly handed Masamba water to soothe their mother as she struggled to breathe. The severity of the attack led to her choking and ultimately ceasing to breathe, sending Masamba into a frenzy of denial and Bazi into a state of despair. Masamba desperately tried to revive Nsayi, pleading with her to wake up, while Bazi collapsed in grief. Eventually, the brothers came together in their mourning and shared the tragic news with their fellow villagers, seeking comfort in the community. Overwhelmed by anger, Bazi sought out Samba, his father, for confrontation, but was forcefully removed by Samba's new guards from his compound. Samba privately mourned his wife, feeling guilty for his actions towards his family. He believed it was too late for apologies or amends, as the damage was done. To avoid appearing weak, he maintained a tough exterior. The community, once his admirers, now scorned him, blaming him for his family's downfall. Samba, who had sought the community's respect and honor through his actions, felt powerless as they turned against him after his wife's death. He had spent his life and resources trying to be the ideal man for this community, neglecting his family's well-being. Now, as a people pleaser, facing the consequences of his actions, he lost the respect and power granted by the community. People whispered and called him names when he passed by. Confronted with his true self-reflection, Samba was too ashamed to attend Nsayi's burial. The community buried Nsayi with respect, and the women pledged to no longer ignore domestic abuse. They protested by the palace, demanding a law that would punish any man who abused a woman by public humiliation and beating. The chief implemented this law in order to honor Nsayi and Zola and to improve the community. 2 weeks later, Samba became seriously ill after excessive drinking. Initially thought to be minor, the village herbalist soon doubted his survival. Bedridden and abandoned by his workers, Samba was left alone. Samba's cries for help went unanswered. No one cared to tend to him or prepare his meals. During one of the village herbalist's visits for treatment, Samba expressed a desperate wish to see his sons, Masamba and Bazi, who had since united to support women in the community facing abuse and to build a better future for their own families. Bazi was initially adamant against meeting their father, but Masamba recalled their mother's dying advice. Reluctantly, Bazi agreed, and one evening they went to see Samba. They met with a foul odor upon entering his hut. Samba had been too ill to bathe, and his condition had worsened to the point where his leg was starting to rot. The sight of their father's condition had left his sons in disbelief. The once mighty Samba was now a shadow of himself. Upon seeing Ma Samba and Bazi, Samba broke down, apologizing for the pain he had caused and pleading for their forgiveness. He confessed his regret and adhering to societal expectations of cruelty, not realizing it would turn him into a monster. As Samba begged for forgiveness on his deathbed, Bazi unleashed his anger, blaming Samba for turning him into a hateful person and for their sister's death. Tears streamed down Bazi's face as he shouted his hatred. Amidst Samba's continuous pleas and apologies, he succumbed to a severe coughing fit. Ma Samba instructed Bazi to fetch the herbalists, but Samba stopped them, said his final farewell, and passed away. The brothers' cries alerted the neighbors, who came to mourn with them. The next day, Samba was laid to rest beside Nsayi and Zola. 13 months later, life had moved forward. Ma Samba was expecting a child with his wife, while Bazi cradled his newborn son. The brothers had learned to forgive their father and heal from their family's past. They fulfilled their promise to become better men, living happily with their families in the community that now stood firmly against abuse. For generations, toxic masculinity has pervaded African culture, resulting in tragic consequences for women and children. Men, foiled by societal norms, have acted harshly and unfairly, perpetuating harm against women unjustly. However, our communities are now evolving where we are actively combating gender-based violence, educating men, and empowering healthy masculinity. I hope you have learned a lot from this story. Please do not forget to support our channel by liking, sharing our videos, and subscribing, turning on the notification button for more educational and enticing stories like this. See you in the next story. Bye!